Lesson 13, other forms of input. So we're going to continue to use conditional statements to take user input. In addition to the key down command that we learned earlier, we'll also talk about other input commands such as those found below here. Let's go ahead and get started with exercise 2. So we need to read through the program, paying attention to the if-else block on line 10, and write down our predictions of what we think will happen. So we've got a variable set up called balloon, which creates a sprite. Then it sets the animation for the balloon, and then it sets the scale or the size of it to 0.1, a tenth of its original size. Then we go to the draw function. We've got a white background, and then we've got if key down space. So if the space bar is pressed, then the balloon dot scale equals balloon dot scale plus 0.02. So we said earlier the balloon scale was 0.1. So if the space bar is pressed, then the balloon dot scale is going to go up by 0.02. So it'll go to 0.12 and then 0.14, and it'll go up by 0.02 each time. Else, if key down is not a space bar, so if space bar is not pressed, then the balloon scale will go to balloon scale minus 0.02. So if the balloon scale was at 0.1, it goes down to 0.08 if the space bar is not pressed. So let's say that here. So balloon scale will go up by 0.02 if space is pressed. Otherwise, it will go down by 0.02. Okay, so let's run it. Oh, let's press the space bar. Oh. Okay, so that was super fast. So it's shrinking when I let go, and it's growing when I press the space bar. Problem with this is once it gets down to 0, it flips upside down. But looks like it worked out how I had expected, so let's move on to the next one. So we are now on the video. Go ahead and watch this on your own, and then we'll move to exercise 4. In this one, we're going to use the else clause, which helps us do one thing if the condition is true, and something different if the condition is false. So we're going to click run to see the swarm of bees created, and a flower on the left side of the screen. Okay. Now what we want us to do is make the swarm of bees appear when the mouse is near the flower, but then we want them to disappear when we come over here to the side, away from the flower. So we need to add an if-else statement after the code that updates the position of the bees. And in the input of the if, use a Boolean to check if the X position on the mouse is on the side of the screen with the flower. So we're going to say if the mouse X is over here, something's going to happen. What's going to happen is we're going to set the visible property of the bee to be visible if it's over here. Okay, and if the mouse position is not over here, if it's on this side, so if the mouse X is greater than 200, then we want the bee dot visible to be false. We don't want the bees to be visible. So let's go ahead and go to the control menu here, and then we can use an if-else statement and drag it over here. Okay, and then once it's over here, like we said, we want to say if the world mouse.x is less than 200, if it's on this side, then the bee will be visible. So let's go ahead and go to our math so we can find our less than. We could use less than or less than to equal to. That's fine. So if some world mouse is less than 200, so world mouse x. So let's go to world, find world.mousex. World.mousex is less than 200. So if world.mousex is less than 200, we want the b.visible to be true. So we're going to say, right now it says sprite.visible equals, and let's bring 3 of these over for our 3 b's. So we're going to say b1 because that was the name of the first one, b2 was the name of the second variable, and b3 was the name of the third variable. So as we can see here, we've got b1, b2, and b3. So we've got back to the if statement. If the world.mousex is less than 200, b1.visible equals true. b2.visible equals true. And b3.visible equals true. So if they're on here less than 200, the b is going to show up. Else, we'll go back and do the same thing except make it false. So we could go back to our sprite.visible, and let's get 3 of them for all 3 b's. Now we're going to do the same thing, make sure we get our variable names correct. b1, b2, b3 dot visible equals false. So the else means if the first statement is not true, so if the world mouse is not less than 200, if it's not on this side, then it's going to be on this side, obviously. So we want the b's to be not visible. So we put false on b.visible. So let's run it. And I've got my mouse over here. The b's are there. I move my mouse over, and the b's disappear. So when it's less than 200, the b's are there. When my mouse is greater than 200, between 2 and 400, it's going to be, the b's will be invisible. Perfect. Let's go to the next one. So on the next one, exercise 5, it talks about other forms of input. We've got our gears again from our last lesson. This time, let's see, they already spin in one direction when you press the space bar. So if I press space, they turn. But now we want them to spin the other direction when the space bar is not pressed. So if I press space bar, it turns this way. We want to make it so that when I let go, it turns the other way. So right now it's just stopping when I let go. So let's go ahead and do that. So we look at our information here. We've got our blue gear, our green gear, and our red gear. And we've got our draw function down here. If key down space, so if space is being pressed, the blue gear rotation, or blue gear dot rotation equals blue gear dot rotation minus 1. So the blue gear will be going minus 1 more each time. So it'll be going counterclockwise. And then we got the green gear dot rotation to go as green gear dot rotation plus 1. So it's going this way. And the same with the red gear. Red gear rotation equals red gear dot rotation plus 1 as long as spacebar is pressed. So what we can do to add to this is just a regular if statement, but to add the else, we can click down here on this plus sign, and that gives us the option to add the else in here. So if the key down is space, they'll be going in these directions. Negative for blue, positive for the other two. Now we're going to say else, so if spacebar is not pressed down, then we want the rotations to be opposite. So let's go ahead and say, go to our sprites, and let's go to sprite.rotation. Sprite.rotation equals, and we'll bring 3 over because we have 3 different gears, and we need to make sure we match the spelling exactly. So blue gear with a capital G dot rotation, green gear with a capital G again, and red gear with a capital G. All right, and then we can just type in again. So blue gear dot rotation equals blue gear dot rotation plus 1 because we're going in the opposite direction of when the spacebar is pressed. Now we're at green gear. So green gear dot rotation equals green gear dot rotation minus 1 because as we see up here it's going plus 1, so now we need to change it to minus 1 when space is not pressed. And then we'll do the same for red gear. Red gear dot rotation minus 1 because it's the opposite of the plus from before. So we've got all 3 of those in there. Let's reset it, hit run. Okay, they're turning opposite. I press space and then they go back to their original direction. I let go of space and they go to the opposite direction again. So let's move to the next one. All right, less 6 is just talks a little bit more about how if else statements works, and you can go ahead and read through that. And then we'll move to the next one. All right, mouse X and Y. One of the simplest ways to take input is to make a sprite follow the user's mouse. position, and you can get the X and Y location of the mouse using world.mouseX and world.mousey, which we used a little bit earlier for the bees on the flower. So let's go ahead and make the bee follow the mouse. So the bee image is already loaded in the animation tab. So we need to create the bee sprite that draws in the center of the window. We need to then, inside the draw loop, update the position of the sprite to the position of the mouse. So we're going to set the position of the bee to the world.mouseX for the X position and the Y to world.mousey, and then we're going to run it. So first of all, we need to go to sprites, because right now we just have a draw function that's blank. We don't have anything before it. So we need to create a sprite first, so we can have a picture to work with or an image. So we go to var sprite, and let's just call it B equals create sprite at 200, 200. So that'll create it in the center of the canvas here. And then we want to go ahead and set the animation. So we'll go to sprite.setAnimation. We needed to make sure to change this to B because we had named it B here. So b.setAnimation equals, and let's set it to the B animation. And you can always check here to see what animations you have. Here's B right here. So that matches the name. We'll go back to our code and finish up with go ahead and putting what we need to in the draw function. So we've set a sprite, we've created a sprite, we've set the animation for it, and now we just need to actually draw the sprite and figure out where it's going to be on the canvas. So if you go to the world menu, you can then find the draw sprites command, and we'll throw that into the draw function so that the sprite can be drawn here. Now, if we just started it like this, we'd just see the sprite and that's it. But we need to do more than just that. Okay, we also need to make sure it follows wherever the mouse is. So let's continue and add what we need to. So we've got the sprites section here where we can say sprite.x, and we're going to put this before the draw sprites so that the position changes before it's shown. Okay, before it's shown on the screen. The name of the sprite was B, so b.x equals, and remember the world.mouseX. So if we go to world, we've got world.mouseX in there. So b.x equals world.mouseX. So wherever my mouse is, that's where the b's x position is going to be. And then we'll do the same for y. We'll go to sprites, go to sprite.y, and bring that in here. And we're going to change this again to b. Make sure the name of your sprite matches with your variable that we set earlier. So b.y equals, and we can just click in here and say b, say world.mousey. So if we go into the world section, world.mousey, and there we go. And then it's going to draw the sprites. Now in here we've got a background that's blue. So if we want to do that, we could do that as well. We could set a background. If we go to the drawing section, bring the background over here before the bee, so the bees will be drawn afterwards, so they'll be on top of the background. And we can change the background color by clicking on this drop down menu. We can make it blue if we want. Then let's go ahead and run it. And it's following it around. So it's a little bit darker blue than what was chosen there, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and finish it. Move to the next.